So, video compression, this is one of those things that we've taught over and over again, and students don't seem to care or understand anything about what you're saying until the moment they really need it to fix their patch. And then it's like they're
everything's gone to crap because it's like, it doesn't work anymore. And
right.
Like, well,
and then they really, really are super interested in video compression.
now I need to know.
Right. So anyway, this is probably going to go in one ear and out the other for everyone, but I think it's groovy.
They can reference this screencast when they need to.
Yeah. So video compression is how you go from a huge file to a smaller file when you're dealing with video files. So, you know, most video is now at 720p or 1080p video, which is 1920 by 1080 pixels, and usually it happens at 30 frames per second. So if you had 1920 by 1080 pixels 30 times a second, it was uncompressed, your video file would be just totally gigantic.
Right.
You would have a video, you know, a typical movie, like an hour and a half movie would be, you know, 20 DVDs worth of material, right?
Right.
So the only way they can fit an entire movie at that resolution onto a single DVD, also the only way we can have things like YouTube, which are sending videos in real time over the internet, is to compress the hell out of them. I mean, you have to make it a much smaller file. So when I started doing video compression, it was things like Cinepack and you know, Photo JPEG. There's these really old compression formats, and now H.264 is the thing everybody uses. So it's a very sophisticated video compression algorithm. They're coming out with H.265 next, and you know, so but H.264 is what we all know. YouTube uses it. You know, all the online video that everybody watches is H.264. I believe like things like Netflix are also H.264. So it's made much of what we think of as the internet possible, because, you know, if you didn't have good video compression, you couldn't have video on the web. So how do you compress videos? So, all right. The problem is, and now I'm going to completely contradict everything I just said, is that in Macs, sometimes you want to not use H.264 because H.264 is, the way they get those small file sizes is all through math. Complicated algorithms, compressing and decompressing, require a lot of CPU power. So like in our iPhones, we have dedicated chips that do the compression and the decompression on hardware. So that's why we can do like record video and playback video on our phones. But Macs does not have hardware dedicated video decompression. It has to do it all on the CPU. So sometimes in Macs, when we want to do things that are high performance, like scrubbing through a video, we want to have very lightly compressed video. So we're going to use a very old style of compression called JPEG. JPEG is still the way we compress most of our photos online, even though it's not super efficient. But it's really fast to decompress a JPEG file. So any individual frame, if we compress our video as a sequence of JPEG files, or JPEG frames basically, then decompressing it requires almost no CPU. It's like really fast compared to H.264. So we can scrub around in video at high frame rates without having to wait for the decompression to happen. So I used to compress all my video with QuickTime Player Pro, but it seems like Apple is not really supporting QuickTime Pro very much. So I found a new tool called AVF Batch Converter, and there's a link to it right here. And that takes you to this free utility. It's got a pretty, you know, simplistic interface, but it works really well, and it's actually really fast also. And you can batch convert many files at the same time, so it's pretty great. So you just download the latest release of, we were using the pre-release. Okay, so you download whatever release you want, whether it's Windows or, does this work for Windows? I'm not sure. Definitely works for Mac. So we'll download the 1.682 DMG, and then we've got it already running here. So this is the interface for AVF Batch Converter, and I'll show you exactly how to do the conversion. So we've got this video here. It's a you can see it is a H.264 1280 by 720 video with AAC audio at 30 frames a second, and all told, even though it's 4 minutes and 34 seconds, it's only 67 megabytes. That still just kind of shocks me that it's so low. So the reason we can get those, let's just like mute that for a second. The reason we can get really low frame rates, really low file sizes, and it looks great. So we can get those low file sizes because H.264 is doing all this math behind the scenes to make sure it's not duplicating any data. So there's a whole thing on video compression. Basically, it says, oh, okay, this whole area here is the same color blue, so instead of recording every pixel as its blue color, it just sort of says, all right, make this whole block the same color. And it does that all over the place. That's why when you see errors in compressed video, you see this weird blocky format. Sometimes it shows itself how it's done. So usually when there's some kind of mistake or gap in the file, it'll make that weird distorted look. But you can see lots of blocks in the video. And so it's sort of breaking up the video into squares and saying, okay, all these square colors are the same, all these pixels are the same color in this square. And it also compresses temporally. So it not only says everything in this block is the same color, but it stays the same color for like the next 15 frames. So it does spatial and temporal compression. If you want to know more about compression, there's a great video here on YouTube.
Video compression
this guy
is a very important aspect
goes into a lot of
video
detail
streaming
about how
websites
compression actually works. It's a good overview. And then let's get back to those in a second. But let's look at AVF batch converters. So how do you actually recompress? We've got this H.264 movie, this Yukon Striker roller coaster movie. I want to recompress it into a usable H.264 movie. And the way we can do that is you just drag it onto the files to convert here. And we're going to load up our settings, and I want to compress it to PJPEG. So that just uses photo JPEG on every frame of video. It still outputs one movie file. It's not going to output 2,000 individual JPEG files. It's going to output one video file, but every video frame in the file is going to be its own unique photo JPEG. So there's no temporal compression. It's not going to take into account any sort of time-based compression. It's only going to do spatial compression. But we have a bunch of options here. We could compress into H.264, ProRes, and there's this new algorithm that Max uses called HAP. Some other programs use it too. So HAP is a nice compromise between file size and speed of playback. But I like photo JPEG. So let's compress it as photo JPEG. About, I think around 50, between 50 and 100% video is fine. So we'll set it there. You can resize the video at the same time, change the actual pixel dimensions of the video, but we'll leave it alone. Linear PCM means basically don't compress the sound. So let's leave the sound uncompressed, and we'll say close settings. And then I'm just going to go over here and say append a .mov on the end of it and put it in the same folder as the destination. So it should just appear on my desktop. And then I hit export, and it's going to work away. And while it's doing that, we can talk about these other two things. So this guy made a I am sitting in a room video. So this is pretty great. It's kind of a riff on Alvin Lucier's I'm sitting in a room. Let's mute this. So he's recording himself here, and he's going to upload it to YouTube. And YouTube automatically compresses a video when you upload it. It compresses as a pretty highly compressed H.264 video. And then he's going to download the video from YouTube and upload it again to YouTube and recompress it again. And so he does this. He must have written a script to do this, but he does it like 1,000 times. So after 10 iterations of upload and download and upload and download, you start to see how the algorithm works because it's amplifying itself every time it goes through. And as this is the 75th time it goes through, and let's see, 200 times. So after 200 iterations of compression, you start to see what the compression's actually doing. I love this demo.
It's so cool.
So this is how the compression is sort of thinking about the video. And then eventually it just gets to be complete nonsense. And the sound is just insane too. But it's, let's see, are we almost done? Okay, so video recompression's a little bit slow. This YouTube demo is actually a riff off of the original, which is Alvin Lucier talking in a room. So he's did this audio recording where he reads this small poem. He's sitting in a room. He reads this small poem into a microphone, and then rewinds the tape, plays it back through speakers that are in the same room, and records the second iteration from the speakers to the microphone in that room. Then he plays that through the speakers again, records it again, and he does multiple iterations of this until at the end, what it sounds like. So you can hear the room starts to pick up its own sort of
feedback.
eventually it starts to just sound like, well, here, let's go forward a little. At the beginning, it just sounds like him.
What you will hear then.
And then, after many repetitions, and then at the end, it just sounds like a bell. I just love that. I think it's so great. Okay, let's wait till our video's done here, almost. And after this is done compressing, it's going to appear on the desktop, and we should have a new file. Even though it says MP4, even though it says H.264, it's actually a photo JPEG movie at 1280 by 720. And now we can scrub around. Look how fast it is. It's just so effortlessly scrolling. You can feel the computer having an easier time dealing with this. It's just immediately apparent. Wow. Okay, so it's much smaller, but look at the file size. Oh no. 993 megabytes versus what was the original, like 63 or something?
Yeah, it's slow.
So that's it. So, but yeah, you pay a price. Your file's going to be bigger. But for Macs, at least, there's a lot of situations where you want, maybe you want a lot of videos to play back simultaneously. Maybe you are scrubbing around in a video or playing it backwards or
changing the rate of the video.
Changing the rate of the video or indexing to specific frames very rapidly. There's a lot of situations where you might want to the highest speed performance in terms of video playback as possible. And this is the way to do it. And the tool we use typically is AVF Batch Converter. So, all right, that was long.
It was long.
Okay, bye.